Writing songs, it wasn't the question of whether I could write songs, it was the question of whether anyone would care. And so,
For decades, she let her piano do the talking. She stayed out of feuds, avoided drama, and never chased headlines. But behind the quiet grace and heartfelt melodies was a storm of buried betrayals, dismissals, and scars that never quite healed. Carole King, the woman whose lyrics bled honesty and whose melodies shaped generations, never needed controversy. Her truth lived in the spaces between the notes. But today, she's finally naming names. 6 of them. 6 musicians who crossed lines, shattered trust, or disrespected the sacredness of song.
This isn't tabloid gossip. It's a reckoning. A lifetime of quiet pain that now demands to be heard. Let's start with the betrayal that stunned even her most devoted fans. 1. Elton John. The duet that died in a tornado of ego.
In 1983, what could have been a magical moment between two piano giants fell apart before it ever began. Carole admired Elton's talent, his flair, his melodic mind, and welcomed the idea of collaboration. But when they sat down to rehearse, it turned chaotic. Elton interrupted mid-verse, rewrote her chords, and dismissed her approach as too tame. Carole later told friends it was like trying to harmonize with a tornado. She walked out of the room, and out of that potential duet for good. That session wasn't just a creative clash. It was a moment of erasure, her voice overpowered in a room where she was meant to shine. She never looked back.
2. Don Henley. Control masquerading as collaboration.
Back in 1979, during a recording session in LA, Carole and Don Henley, of Eagles fame, collided hard. She respected him deeply, his songwriting, his voice, and the way the Eagles blended California rock with introspective storytelling. But in the studio, things turned icy. Carole wanted raw emotion, Henley demanded surgical precision. She accused him of sanding down the soul of every song until it felt sterile. He called her too sensitive. The fallout. She walked out mid-session. When Henley later dismissed her ideas publicly in an interview, Carole cut ties completely. To this day, she refuses to attend
events if he's on the guest list. 3. Joni Mitchell. Admiration turned into a Cold War.
Carole once saw Joni as a sister in sound. 2 women, each carving their space in a man's world, writing truth into melody. She bought every record, defended her to critics, and quietly cheered her success.
But then came the night at an industry party, where Joni allegedly referred to Carole's work as domestic poetry.
The phrase, small, dismissive, shattered something in Carole. She had always believed in giving voice to the sacredness of everyday life. To be reduced like that by someone she admired deeply, it stung. She never confronted Joni. That wasn't her style. But she stopped quoting her, stopped spinning her records, and dodged any mention of her name in interviews.
Because betrayal from an icon doesn't leave a bruise, it leaves silence.
4. Eric Clapton. The rejection that echoed. It was meant to be a moment of musical intimacy, an acoustic rendition of Natural Woman at a benefit concert. Carole approached Eric Clapton with humility and hope, envisioning his legendary guitar cradling her voice in warmth and reverence.
But Clapton barely looked up. "Not my thing," he muttered.
Carole smiled through the rejection, but inside, something collapsed. It wasn't the words, it was the chill. The tone. The dismissal of not just an idea, but her entire legacy. She didn't need his approval. But she had hoped for understanding. Instead, she was met with cold indifference.
And that silence? It was louder than any guitar solo. 5. Bob Dylan. A shrug that cut deeper than a song.
When Carole and Dylan shared the bill at a festival in the early 70s, expectations ran high. Two poetic titans. A dream pairing. She approached him backstage, not as a fangirl, but as a peer, one who admired his grit and genius.
He didn't even look up. Cigarette dangling, strumming his guitar, he asked, "You're the one who writes for moms, right?"
It wasn't just a jab. It was a reduction. A stereotype. A complete misunderstanding of what she had fought to build. Carole had carved her name into music history by writing what people truly felt. Dylan made her feel like that honesty was weakness. She never spoke of it again publicly. But something changed. She stopped quoting him, stopped defending him, and whenever his name came up, she answered with tight smiles and tight lips.
Because some wounds hum under the surface long after the applause fades. 6. Phil Spector, the monster behind the curtain.
This was the name she hesitated to say the longest. Not out of fear anymore, but because some shadows carry echoes. Phil Spector was already a legend when Carole started in the Brill Building. She watched from afar, admired his wall of sound, and hoped to learn. But once inside his world, admiration turned to dread.
He mocked her lyrics, belittled her ideas, and once sneered, "Leave the heavy stuff to the men." She was barely out of her teens. But the worst came one night, in a hallway outside Studio B. No cameras. No witnesses. Just him. Towering. Whispering. Threatening. She never shared what he said. Not even in her memoirs. But it was the night she decided, never again. She built her legacy without him. Without his sound, without his approval. And when Spector's violent, criminal history finally came to light, Carole wasn't shocked. She had seen the monster behind the genius long before the world did. Carole King's story isn't about revenge, it's about release.
Each of these 6 names holds a story. A moment. A scar. They interrupted her rhythm, challenged her spirit, and tried to shrink her voice into background music. But Carole didn't just survive the noise, she turned it into melody. These confessions aren't petty. They're powerful. They mark the journey of a woman who refused to let silence erase her. For years, she let the music speak. But now, with legacy behind her and courage in her voice, Carole King is speaking for herself. Not with bitterness. With truth. Because the songs you love weren't born from perfection. They were born from pain, persistence, and the unwavering belief that emotion, raw and real, matters more than ego. And now, as she lifts the veil, we're reminded of something vital. Behind every timeless melody is a story we've never heard, until now. Thank you for watching Rock Fame Diaries, where music legends live, and the stories behind the sound come alive. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We've got more untold truths and behind-the-scenes revelations from the artists who changed the world, one chord at a time. Until next time, keep listening, and never forget the people behind the music. God bless.